Right, how y'all doing? How's everyone this morning? All right, great spot. Thank y'all for having me. Love Creative Mornings. I've been going for years, and it's been a minute since I've been back here in Lexington and gone to Creative Mornings. So much appreciated. Love to see you all. Here to radiate Kismet to everyone this morning. And it's funny because when this theme came up, I thought about it and I was like, I have to admit, I don't know if I really believe in Kismet. I never believed in fate, destiny, or the inability to shape your own journey. Being an entrepreneur to me was all about fighting. It was all about fighting and climbing and literally living for that fight every single day. And luck was earned. And fortune was reserved. And chance encounters, a doorway opening to impossibilities, that all seemed very mythical to me. It all seemed like theory. And give you all a great line from another entrepreneur about theory. He once told me, one of the most successful people I've ever met, said, JK, action is everything. Everything that's not action is theory, and theory is bullshit. Hopefully we don't have any academic people out there. But, compared to vision and hard work and sacrifice and grind and determination and everything that I've found in my career that it takes to succeed, I never really thought about fortune. I never really thought about destiny. I never really thought about any of those attributes having a meaningful impact on me. But then I started thinking about it, and I started going through 20 years of my life and the impact that I've tried to have on the world. And I realized that I have lived an impossible dream. I've got to live a life in the creative industry. 4 dreams that seemed like impossibilities. Forecastle Festival, a nautically themed activism-centric festival in Kentucky that grew from a small gathering to an international attraction. 75,000 fans annually, $100 million of economic impact, and an unquantifiable amount of attention that's been put on our state for the past 20 years. Forecastle Foundation, a dream I had when I was 10 years old, to protect the world's natural awesome, the richest reservoirs of life left on the planet. 2.3% of the Earth's surface that carries over 50% of species known to man. A small group of friends and I got together in 2009 and decided we were going to do something about that. And together we protected over 50,000 acres of land and waterways across 3 continents and 6 countries, with more being added every day. Man of the Land, a desire to advance entrepreneurship globally by advising and inspiring young dreamers and doers with warm hearts and cool minds. And I got to fly over the world for 2 years and do that, which was incredible. In my latest venture/adventure, Art of Impact, helping businesses and nonprofits reach unreachables, aka Gen Z millennials, through a model I've perfected over 20 years at the nexus of music, marketing, nonprofit, and philanthropic enterprises. Now, to ask me before I had this gig, again, I would have pinned very little of the success of those 4 ventures on fortune, destiny, fate, or Kismet. I probably would have placed it all on vision, team, timing, execution, and the most important thing for any entrepreneur, anyone in the creative industry, is an unrelenting desire to succeed. It's not easy to live a life in the creative industry. You got to learn to live with turbulence every day. You got to learn to live with very unsettling feelings every day, much like our world the past couple years. But there's a million ways that you can fail, and as someone great once told me too, the difference in entrepreneurs and a lot of people that aren't entrepreneurs is entrepreneurs, when there's 99 ways that you could fail, they only focus on the one thing that can actually help them succeed. And I feel like I've spent my life in that 1% there. But when I look back at 20 years and I peel back the onion, I realize that there's so many moments that mattered most. And those moments that mattered most were way out of my control. moments that could have derailed everything, and moments that added wings and propulsion to make impossible dreams possible, especially for someone who dropped out of college and had no formal education in music or entertainment or entrepreneurship or marketing or nonprofit development or sponsorship development or any of the things that I ended up pursuing. So I'm going to share a couple stories today, and really one in particular that helped me on my journey and made me realize that every day you do need to spend some time realizing that it's okay to get rid of control. It's okay to let go of that. That sometimes if you're working hard and you're doing the right things for the right reasons, the economics a lot of times take care of themselves and you end up where you need to be. So I'm going to go back 15 years ago. I was 25 years old, and I'm going to go back to Forecastle, 2005, which was let's see, there we go. Which was an incredible day for me, and a day really that set the scene for everything that I ended up doing in my career. And it was the biggest day of my life. I was 24 years old, and this was year 4 of Forecastle. We had spent 3 years growing in a small little park called Tyler Park. If you're familiar with the Olmsted Park system in Louisville, Kentucky, Forecastle grew out of the smallest park of that whole system, 13 acres, the smallest park Frederick ever designed. And as a kid, I grew up next to it. My parents lived right up on top of the hill there. And I always knew that Frederick had a big vision for these parks beyond recreation, that he wanted them used for music. He wanted them to be vehicles and channels for the community to gather. And I started the first Forecastle with probably 100, 150 bucks, I think, maybe 100, 200. There was definitely more participants as patrons than there was actual patrons. If you include the homeless population, I guess maybe it would reverse. But anyway, it started really no different than thousands and thousands and thousands of other concerts and small events across this country every single day. I mean, there was nothing unique, special. I had no unique gifts or anything like that to do this. I just had a determination to do it because it felt like the right thing to do. It felt like there was a gap in the market, a market in the gap, even though I didn't even know what those things meant at 24. At that time, it was. But after 3 years of growing that, from getting small to a couple hundred people, to 1,000 people, to 1,500 people, really kind of getting that model together, I decided that I was going to go big. I was going to take a big jump. I was going to go from the smallest Olmsted Park to the largest, 13 acres to like 494 acres. And it's kind of a funny story because the park we ended up going to, Cherokee, which like no one had been allowed to use for a decade because it was like the most famed, prized crown jewel of the entire park system in Louisville. And I'll never forget putting on like my high school like St. X, attire and walking into the Metro Parks Department and it completely fabricating a story that I think I made up on the spot that I couldn't do the festival in Tyler Park anymore because like there wasn't enough parking and like, could you just let us move our couple hundred people like 3 blocks down the road and happen to do it like in this incredible scenic outlook where I can see the entire city and it's absolutely beautiful. And he looked at me and he was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I walked out and I was like, oh my God, first big break. And the next 6 months were insane. I worked for 6 months. I worked 60, 70 hours a week, unpaid, recruited an army of volunteers, pounded the pavement, raised $60,000 in media and cash sponsorships with no education or experience on how to actually do that. Had billboards, posters all over the city. It was on the cover of magazines. It was a big deal in the city. At that time, there were no festivals like there is today. It was a complete desert. I think we formed the same year as Bonnaroo and Austin City Limits and a couple years after Lala, but there wasn't many festivals, contemporary festivals like this. And for me, it was the opportunity to pull off a historic event. I mean, it was the first festival in this one park in a decade, but it also was a completely new festival model. One of the reasons that inspired me to do Forecastle was I thought festivals for the purpose of simply entertainment value was very boring and very bland and very one-dimensional. And why can't you have artists and activists all on the same pedestal? Why can't they all be represented equally? Why can't they all be marketed equally? We're all trying to change the world here. We're all trying to make everything a better place. Why should musicians be up here and these incredible nonprofits that are doing incredible work be down here? Let's forget all that. Let's put everything on the same level. No one had ever done that before. And it was actually inspired a bit by Perry Farrell, Jane's Addiction, who I got to hang out with actually this same year when I was 25 and spend a lot of time with him and talk to him about how he developed Lollapalooza. And I'll never forget going to the first Lollapalooza, and I was going by the Flaming Lips, they were on like a tiny little side stage, like smaller than this. And I just remember seeing all these incredible organizations, from Cincinnati and at Riverbend, and they're all just like sitting on the side, and people are just walking around them and going to see the artists and the bands, and they're completely ignored. And I had a big problem with that. Because these groups are on the front lines of the issues that matter most to us, and especially to younger generations. So I figured they need to be on the same pedestal, the same platform. They need to speak to the same audience. So anyway, long story short, the city gave me the keys, which I still to this day can't believe they did. They would end up taking away the keys. Know that. And everything was really on the line for me. We spent 6 months and we got this incredible grassroots following and everyone's talking about it. And I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I didn't know how to do this stuff, but I was just figuring it out because that's what you do as an entrepreneur. You figure it out. And as the weeks got up and it got closer and closer, and we're preparing for thousands and thousands of people to descend on the park, what could go wrong? Well, a whole lot. Talk about weather. Talk about electricity. Talk about all types of things. I always had like these quotes I remember sitting above my bed, and they would actually get me to sleep at night. And I remember the first one I think was one from Gandhi, and it said something about how anything is possible with an indomitable will. Anything is possible with will. It's all about having the will. And channeling some Eddie Vedder here too, I remember him saying in a song, life comes from within your heart and desire. Life comes from within your heart and desire. And that's really what it's about, because impossible dreams are possible with passion and desire and persistence. And that's all I thought about when I went to sleep and I also thought about that, if this whole thing was a disaster, at least it was free. And, I'm not going to deal with any legalities. But anyway, I went to sleep that night. I feel like I slept pretty well until about 3:30 in the morning. And the first warning sign came at 3:30 in the morning. And I got woken up by a frantic call from my roommate. And at first I thought this was great. Like, he wants to come volunteer all day. He hadn't been talking about anything that I've been doing, but now he's into it and he's going to come help me all day and like be my number two, and like this is going to be great. Well, no, he didn't want to volunteer. He was actually in the hospital after getting into a bar fight the night before and had a chair broken over his face and broke part of his cheekbone and nose. And I had to go pick him up. I was like, of all the days you could call me to go pick you up from the hospital, you're going to pick the one day that's like the biggest day of my life. So anyway, I went and got him, and I brought him back and took care of him. And then about 5:30 in the morning, I went to go wake up my core group of volunteers, and they had rented out a house right by the park. And I drove over there. There's probably about 30 of them. And when I got there, all the lights were on. And I was like, awesome. They're up. They're ready to go. Like, this is great. Like, the plan's happening. Like, this is happening. No, actually not. Not at all. They actually had never gone to sleep. They had partied all night. There was Red Bull cans all over the floor. There was like smoke billowing through the windows. There was like sleeping bags scattered everywhere and like ramen noodle packages and stuff. And here's where it gets really good. So here comes the third strike. So The night before the festival, I actually received the one call you never want to receive as a festival producer, or any event producer for that matter. It was from our production company, and it was regarding the main stage, which was the last piece to put on the site. We had spent days and days and days building this incredible site, this beautiful setting overlooking hundreds of acres of the park, 2 stages, tons of sponsor activations, art installations, hospitality, concessions, so much stuff. And this stage was literally the last piece to fit the 1,000-piece puzzle. So much so that even all the tressing and lighting and everything and roof above the stage had already been built. It just needed the stage to slip underneath of it. The most important piece and the last piece. And the stage that we had secured was a brand new city stage, probably $300,000 hydraulic stage. And the way it works is these stages, they get put on the back of a truck, so they fold like this, and they go down, they fold, and they come back down. Well, the city driver that was doing it drove it underneath an overpass with too low of clearance. You can imagine what happens. Talk about Kismet, right? So literally the final piece of our 1,000-piece puzzle got completely destroyed. And of course I get blamed for it, first time to use the stage. But, literally everything that I'd worked for 4 years at that point, hung in the balance of having that stage. But he assured me, as every good production manager would, that everything was going to be fine. Kismet. And he had found a supplier in Nashville who would drive a new stage that night over to the site and be there by the time we got there at about 6 in the morning. And so I got there right as the sun's coming up, and I'm doing interviews, and I'm looking over the site with media, with cameras, and there's no stage. And I'm playing it cool, The second I got off camera, I literally call our production manager. I'm like, okay, where is the stage? And I could already hear in his voice the panic and terror coming out. And he actually assured me that the stage was there. No, I'm standing here. The supplier just couldn't find the location. So I'm like, okay, 494-acre park, out-of-town vendor, driving around Cherokee Park. Okay, I get it. Maybe that is true. Well, then 20 to 30 minutes goes by, and there's still no stage, and we're 3.5 hours away from showtime. And I call him back, and I'm like, okay, come to Jesus time. What's the real story here? Just tell me, I can deal with it. Maybe I can't deal with it, but just tell me anyway. And the story he tells me just sends shivers down my spine. It still does today. He said, JK, I don't know how to tell you this. You never want to start with that. But the driver for the truck fell asleep at the wheel and flew off I-65 and is being airlifted to Vanderbilt University Hospital. I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do either. I'm 25 years old. I had never done anything remotely on this scale before. This is 20 times the scale that we had done Tyler Park, maybe 25 times. But I knew that I couldn't panic. I knew too much depended on it. Fate had something in store for me. Kismet had something in store for me. I just had to unlock the door. And I'm standing up there, and again, looking out over the most beautiful scene I had ever seen in my life. This incredible park. It's like Central Park in New York City. The sun's coming up. I'm the only person up there at that moment. And it's perfect. And so I took a walk down the hill, behind where the stage was supposed to be. It made my way backstage to these bike lanes that we were using actually to bring artists in. Artists that were supposed to be performing very soon on a stage that wasn't there. And even though my whole life was on the line, it took me 4 years to get there, I felt this incredible sense of calm come over me. And I don't know where it came from, somewhere way up in the ether, but I really was never scared. I was never scared. Even though what would happen in the next 3 hours would completely make or break my career and probably my sense of self at that point, I had to trust in something bigger than myself and let it speak to me. And when you do that, a lot of times it will speak to you. And it spoke to me loud and clear. It said, JK, pick up your phone and start calling. Just start calling. And I did. Random numbers. I don't even know who I was calling. I really don't. People who called me, I guess. And by the fourth or fifth call, somebody picked up. And it was our concessionaire. I don't even think I knew who I was talking to at the time. I just knew that somebody picked up the phone and they were listening. And I told them everything. I spilled all the beans in a way that left me feeling vulnerable and exposed, but powerful and confident to know that I was getting it off my shoulders and maybe someone could help me. At the end of this long, rambling conversation, which I was confident nothing was going to come from, something did come from it. And he said, JK, give me 10 minutes. I think I may have a solution. And sure enough, he called me back a few minutes later and said, I got a guy. I got a guy, and I offered him anything he wanted to get a 40 by 24 hydraulic stage on site in the next hour, and he's on his way. I didn't believe it, but I waited, and sure enough, a giant semi came rolling over the top of that hill and down that hill about a half an hour later. And with help from all my passed out volunteers, piece by piece, section by section, we got the stage built. And as thousands and thousands of people descended on the park on one of the most beautiful summer days I'll ever remember, we became fully operational. At exactly 12:30 p.m., half an hour past start time, 1 minute more and people would have known something was off a bit, but no one did. And had that concessionaire not picked up that phone at 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday, we wouldn't be standing here today. The show wouldn't have gone on, the bands wouldn't have played, the brand would have been irreparably damaged, and I probably would have picked a more conservative career path. So I really do. I stand here very thankful and very grateful for what happened that day. It instilled in me a sense of confidence that I still have today, that despite all the near disasters and high-pressure situations I've faced since, rivers flooding and 80-mile-per-hour storms and 10,000-person evacuations, I always believe in something greater than myself that would shore up myself in my greatest times of trial. Call it fate, call it Kismet. It was there that day, and it's still with me today. Thank you.